I would now like to invite the Secretary General to provide opening remarks. Once he has done so, we will open the floor for questions and answers. You may begin identifying yourselves in the Q&A tab at any time should you wish to take the floor. Please ensure that you provide your name, region you are joining from, and the name of your ECOSOC accredited organization. You can also choose to put a comment itself in Q&A space. I now invite the Secretary General to deliver his remarks.
Dear friends, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night to all of you, wherever you are in the world. And allow me a first observation. I think we have a Q&A session, but I'm much more interested in listening to your opinions, to your suggestions, to your proposals, and even to your notes about the things that you believe we are not doing well than in a normal question and answer thing. I'm really interested in listening more than in talking, because that is the true nature of dialogue and participation. And it is a great pleasure to be here with all of you. The Town Hall during the Commission on the Status of Women is an important and regular fixture in my calendar. I never miss it. And I welcome this opportunity to meet with women's organizations and feminist civil society and to hear your ideas and concerns, as I've said. Let's be clear. Gender equality is essentially a question of power. And power has for millennia been concentrated in the hands of men to the detriment of all. The challenges we face today, the COVID-19 pandemic, the climate crisis, the growth and spread of conflicts, are largely the result of our male-dominated world and male-dominated culture. Without these, we would not have a war with Russia in Ukraine. And that is why gender equality and gender parity are not only a matter of women's rights, but a fundamental prerequisite for a safer, more peaceful, and more sustainable world for all. And we cannot separate the perilous state of peace in our world from millennia of patriarchy and the suppression of women's voices. Even today, we see a widespread pushback against women's rights and gender equality around the world. When jobs are lost, they are often women's jobs. When rights are threatened, they are often gender-based rights. And we must push back against this pushback. And my recent report on our common agenda outlines 5 transformative actions to share power more equally. To repeal all laws everywhere that discriminate on grounds of gender, and we have it still practically all over the world. To achieve equal participation of women in all sectors and at all levels of decision-making through special measures and quotas where necessary. Parity is essential to have good decision-making wherever, from the boards of companies to the governments to the UN. To invest in women's economic inclusion and address unpaid care work. And it's very interesting that we still have bias in the algorithms for credit distribution against women-led companies. This is something that needs to be eradicated. To center the voices and leadership of young women. The contribution of young women is more than necessary than ever when my generation is showing its inability to deal with the global challenges we have in the world. And finally, for every country to have a plan to end all forms of violence against women and girls. We have made progress on this, but we are far from reaching everywhere as we must. And of course, all these must be treated as the emergency that is backed by the laws, policies, and political will needed to achieve this goal. Taken together, the 5 actions I've just mentioned have the potential to radically transform societies and create the gender equal world we need. Dear friends, this year's Commission on the Status of Women comes at a moment where the world is facing emergencies on several fronts. The war in Ukraine is of great concern to us all, but that is just the latest crisis we face. We have chaotic coups and conflicts affecting multiple countries, from Mali to Ethiopia and Yemen. And we cannot be so concentrated. Of course, there is a human tragedy, a terrible tragedy in Ukraine, but we cannot be so concentrated on the Ukraine that we forget that people are suffering in so many other parts of the world, and the suffering of one human being has the same importance wherever that human being is. And the latest report by the International Panel on Climate Change was an atlas of human suffering, describing a horrific escalation of impacts that are hitting women and girls disproportionately. The continued unequal recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic is laying bare its severe impact on women's rights. The truth is that rich, developed countries have been able to spend trillions of dollars in their recovery. Those dollars are not available, or whatever other currency is not available for most of the poorest countries, and even many middle-income countries that are today in a dramatic debt trap and have not the capacity to provide for the well-being of their population, and women being the most sacrificed. So these are widespread and interlinked crises that affect us all, but not equally. More women than men have lost their jobs as the informal economy struggles to get back on its feet. The responsibility of unpaid care work continues to fall mainly on women and girls, with dire consequences for education, economic independence, and intergenerational poverty. Gender-based violence is an ongoing emergency in its own right. But despite all these challenges, women continue to advocate, to raise their voices for peace, equality, climate action, sustainable development, and human rights for all. Courageous women are in the streets of every continent, fighting for their rights and for more peaceful, inclusive, sustainable economies and societies that benefit us all. And so, dear friends, this year's priority theme at the Commissions on the Status of Women is achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls in the context of climate change, environmental and disaster risk reduction policies and programs. And this is more necessary than ever. This is essential for every community and every country. And as I made clear in my first ever report to the Commission on the issue, it is the greatest sustainable development challenge of our age. The triple planetary crises of climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss pose an enormous threat to progress on women's rights and gender equality. Women and girls, particularly in small island developing states, are bearing the brunt of climate-related droughts, landslides, floods, and hurricanes. And the climate crisis is a human crisis and a women's rights crisis. The Paris Agreement is essential to protecting and advancing women's rights and gender equality, and climate action must include investing in women activists, human rights defenders, and civil society organizations. Dear friends, in my recent report on our common agenda, we have set out a series of proposals for a safer, more peaceful, equal, and sustainable world. Member States now will have to decide whether and how to take them forward. But I would like to stress that this is a feminist agenda based on equal power, participation, and leadership by men and women. We have heard overwhelming support for the specific actions on gender equality, and the United Nations will prioritize their full implementation. These proposals are rooted in existing agreements. They build on the momentum and commitments of the Beijing Platform and Agenda and the concrete achievements of the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. And one of the proposals is to renew the social contract, to respond to today's social and economic needs, the climate and environmental crisis, the digital revolution, and the need for gender justice, among other factors. It's long overdue that our social and economic systems take full account of the unpaid care work and informal labor done mainly by women. Valuing this work is part of the broader proposal we have presented for metrics that complement gross domestic product, that doesn't reflect the reality of our societies. At the global level, our common agenda proposes a more inclusive networked multilateralism based on equal rights and opportunities for all. And inclusivity means full participation in equality by women and men. And the report recommends a new agenda for peace aimed at reducing violence in all its forms, including gender-based violence. And the new agenda for peace calls for women's participation and leadership in all peace efforts, taking the lead from the thinking developed and promoted by feminist civil society around women, peace and security. Our common agenda also recommits to the internal reforms needed to make the United Nations a global leader as a gender-equal organization. We have achieved gender parity among the senior leadership, 190 people, full gender parity 2 years ahead of schedule. And we have sustained and deepened these over the past 2 years. And we have also parity amongst the heads and deputy heads of missions for the first time. I remember when there was only one woman as deputy head of mission in the UN. Today, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Libya, in the DRC, in Central African Republic, we have women leading the UN efforts. That is something completely new in the history of the organization, as we are dealing with some of the most dramatic crises around the world, and we have reached parity on that. And I committed to achieving this goal across the organization at every level, in every entity, by 2028. But numbers are just one step. The entire United Nations system must be realigned to deliver for women and girls. And to this end, I've asked the Deputy Secretary General to oversee an independent review of the gender architecture of the entire United Nations family. I want to ensure that we are fit for purpose to deliver on gender equality. And we'll also build on the success of the Generation Equality Forum as a model of inclusive, networked multilateralism with women and girls at the center. Dear friends, I'm deeply concerned about the decline in civic space globally. According to one authoritative survey, just 3% of people around the world live in countries where civil society organizations can operate in full freedom. Civil society organizations link governments and people. They are a vital voice for human rights. When civil society is muzzled, we lose an essential forum for dialogue, and we lose the lifeblood of democracy. That is why I advocated every possible opportunity for the protection and expansion of civic space. And women's rights organizations, young activists, and women environmental and human rights defenders must be able to play their full part everywhere. The work of civil society, including women activists and feminist groups, is also essential to the success of the United Nations, to our own success. And so this town hall is an important opportunity for me to hear from you and to engage with you directly as we pursue our common goals. Thank you, and I'm here to listen, and please see me as an ally as I look forward to hearing your views. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General, for your powerful words.